Before we get started on the wind and light properties, I would like to show you on how to customize the 2D window. Since a lot of time, especially in the beginning, is spent on designing and drawing the 2D patterns, it can be useful to be able to know how to resize the grid area in the 2D window. So let's jump to Preferences and select the last option, 2D Pattern Window Properties, that is also available under the shortcut F12. And as you can see, the property editor opens up a list of settings that can be found useful. And I'm just going to push this a little bit down so we'll see better. So first of all, if the grid in the 2D window is bothering you, you can switch it off or on right here. And if you want to resize the squares right here, we can just activate the grid, and here it opens up an option that was invisible before, and we can lower this distance, and let's lower it to about 5. And as you can see, this makes the squares smaller, which can be very beneficial if you're working on very small elements and you would like to be precise. Now, another useful setting is the line length. And if I activate it, you see that all of the lengths of all of the lines in the patterns are now available, so I can see them. As you can see, this can lower visibility quite a bit, so it's easier to just turn on or off this feature by simply pressing Shift and Z on your keyboard. So you can switch the lengths on and off when you need them without having to go into the 2D window properties. Now I'm just going to put that back and deactivate the grid, and I'm also going to hide the lengths for now because we don't need them right now. Alright, so let's move on to the light controller. Let's go to Display and select Show Light Controller. So we will be able to see it in our scene. And if we zoom out quite a lot, we can see that it's right here. And by clicking on it, I am able to access its settings in the property editor. So once it's in the scene, the light can be clicked on and moved around using the gizmo. And by the way, if you have a different gizmo right here, you can always go to Preferences, Gizmo, and what I like to use, local coordinate or world coordinate. I just think they're the most useful ones. So you can move the light and you can see that the shadows are beginning to change right here. Now let's take a look at the settings that we have right here. We got the ambient color. The ambient color setting illuminates all surfaces equally with the color that we choose. So if we go for red, you see that our avatar and the clothing gets tinted in red. And the diffuse color has a similar effect, but it illuminates the avatar only where it's hit by light. So as you can see here, when it's getting hit by light, it's a bit more reddish than all of the other places. And what the specular color setting does, it illuminates the shinier parts. So if our avatar would be wearing a garment that has some shiny details, that color would illuminate on those shiny parts. We also have another light in our scene that is right here. And if we click on it, you see that we have the exact same options, so we can change that as well. Alright, now let's just go back to Display and Show Light Controller, switch it off so we won't be able to see it anymore. Now we have already established that the garment under simulation mode is subjected to the laws of gravity, but as with most programs, we are able to cheat that setting by going to the Scene tab in the Object Browser right here and finding the simulation property and clicking on it. We are able to access the gravity option right here, and it's set by default to -9800. Now we can make it even lower to create a drooping effect that can be useful if we want to simulate wet clothing, that sort of just hangs on the avatar. So let's try to do that. And let's simulate. No, apparently it doesn't have an effect, so let's go even lower. Now you can see that it's already pulling it downwards. Now we can also go the other way by going to 0, and let's see what that does to it. And as you can see, very slowly the garment is sort of pulling upwards away from her body. So it's not affected by gravity anymore. So we can reach a number of very cool effects by simply altering this little detail. So let's put that back to default. And then it droops back again. The other subject that I would like to talk about is the wind controller. Now, gravity is not the only thing affecting our garments, so if we're going for a certain look and if we would really like to add some life to our clothing, we can do so with the wind options. If we go to Display and select Show Wind Controller, we can see a tiny cone appear in our scene. And if we click on it, the property editor opens up the settings for the wind. So let's just activate it right here and see what it does. And as you can see, it's already taking an effect on the garment, blowing wind from this direction directly to her. We can also, of course, move the gizmo around and thus alter the effect. And let's take a look at the settings. We have two types, the planar type and the spherical type. The planar controller means that the wind is blowing only to one direction, and the spherical one means that the wind is blowing from every direction, so all over here, just in every direction from the sphere. Let's go back to planar. So, of course, the strength is pretty self-explanatory. It indicates the wind's intensity. And I'm just going to leave it at that. The decay setting sets the reach of the wind, and the frequency, which is measured in seconds, indicates the duration of each cycle. So if it's set to 0, the wind will blow with the same intensity, but if I set it to, let's say, 5 seconds, it will change its intensity in a cycle of 5 seconds. As you can see, we're getting that effect with the more intensity and going to lower. And the turbulence right here in the end tells us how erratic the movement of our garment will be. So we can push this up a little bit. And as you can see, we're getting a completely different result right here. Much more turbulent than it was in the beginning. So this brings this clip to the conclusion, and in the next one we will be exploring the garment and learning how to change it. See you there!